Okay, so welcome back, everybody. What I want to do today is sort of relatively simple. We're learning the book of Ezra, and the title I gave today was How the Prophets Can Help Us Understand What's Happening in Ketuvim. Now, as I mentioned earlier, when you study Sefer Melachim, the author of Sefer Melachim, like Yirmiyahu, when he redacts or puts together Sefer Melachim, is giving the reader the ability to build a timeline through the entire book. In other words, we know when every year whatever king became king, how many years he ruled for, and who was the next king. Now, we don't go with a year by year. We don't count how many years it's been since creation. We're not giving exact year dates, but you can calculate it because we're going from king to king with how many years every king reigned. In Sefer Ezra Nehemiah, in Ezra and Nehemiah, which is the similar book to Malachim that tells the history of the beginning of Beit Sheni, we have a similar style of writing. It goes through the history of the Jewish people, or the key history that the prophets worried about, but there's no attempt to give us a continuous chronology. That's a given. That's objective. You can argue why that is, but there's no doubt in the book of Ezra and the book of Nehemiah, which is really one book, and we have dates. And we're using the dates of Persian kings because there's no Jewish king, but there's no continuous chronology. Now, you can calculate a couple of them, but because there's no continuous chronology, commentators want to figure it out. What I want to focus on today is the biggest problem in that chronology, okay? So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to show you where it all begins. We're going to follow nice and simple. We're going to share my screen, and we want open up a Tanakh. It's nice and easy. I'll use an English Hebrew Tanakh. And we will. And you have any questions, just ask as we go through. But I think it's real simple, but people always get all confused. Okay. The book begins in the first year of Koresh. I'm purposely not giving dates to BCE or whatever it is, or Briat Olam, just relative dates within the book. I begin with the first year of the reign of Koresh, king of Paras, which outside history tells us, by the way, is 538, give or take a year, BCE. Just as Yirmiyahu promised, that what? After 70 years, the Babylonian Empire will fall. Yirmiyahu didn't promise you'd return after 70 years or you'd rebuild the temple, but rather, the 7 years, we did this last week, for 7 years, Bavel will be in charge. When Bavel falls, God will give you an opportunity to return, but you have to want to return, and that was Daniel's prayer, and that's what Isaiah pretty much is about. If we have time, we'll talk about that in a minute. Now, and then we're giving credit to God for Korah's decision to allow the Jews to return. So chapter 1 of Ezra, I'm sure you read, is the Jews getting permission to return. And our favorite line is anyone who doesn't make Aliyah should send money and take care of his guilt. Remember, Ribachem B'cholamo should make, and anyone who sends behind should send money to help support them, people in Jerusalem. Things haven't changed much in years. Okay. Then, keep this in mind, Pasuk Zayin, this will help us with years. King Koresh, when he allowed the Jews to return to build the temple, because Nebuchadnezzar, 7 years earlier, approximately, when he destroyed the temple, or actually 50 years earlier, when he plundered the temple, he took the gold and the silver and the vessels from the temple and brought it to his palace in Bavel. So Koresh goes to Nebuchadnezzar's palace, takes out the gold and silver and the kelim and the vessels from the Beit HaMikdash, and gave them to Koresh, and Koresh took them out and gave them to the treasurer and gave it to Sheshbatzar, the Nasi of Yehuda, to go to bring it to Israel with him. And therefore, Mshat, the kelim of the Beit HaMikdash have returned to Jerusalem already the first year of Koresh. Now, why is that important for anyone who studied Megillat Esther? Who can tell me?
Well, it's important because if Yirmiyahu, the whole argument with Yirmiyahu and Hanan ben Azor was the topic of, he said, I'm the Kalim back. And I think this is, I know it's not answering your question, but I found, I reminds me of that story of Hanan ben Azor, where the thing was returning the Kalim in the Beis Hamikdash.
No, everyone agrees that kelim are going to return. The question, how long it's going to take. Hanan says within 2 years. Yirmiyah says it'll be another 60 or 70 years. But
But there, but there,
yeah. There's a famous Midrash Megillat Esther, which leads to our Midrash when we read the kelim shonim. Remember at the party, what did the rabbi say about that?
Yeah,
the
they
Kohen
were
rabbis
using
say,
the kalim from the Beis Hamikdash in the party.
now, I want to show you how drash is built on something really deep from Pshat, but we don't understand the Pshat, you can't appreciate the drash. Yeah? The drash, the famous drash is, the Gemara asks the question, why are we almost destroyed in the time of Achashverosh? Why was there a gzerah, why was there a decree that almost destroyed the Jewish people? We must have been doing something wrong. We wouldn't have been in trouble if nothing was going wrong. A lot of people don't paskin that, but that's what Chumash says all the time. And all the Nevi'im. We must have been doing something wrong in Shushan to be almost destroyed in Persia. And what did the rabbis say? At Achashverosh's party, the Jews participated. And at that party, what china was he using? What serving dishes was he using? He was using serving dishes taken from the Beit HaMikdash. Got it? And because Jews ate from those vessels, from that dinnerware, etc., that's why we're punished. Now, could that be pshat? There's no way. Got it? Now, what's the drush behind it? Now, in pshat, the kelim of the Beit HaMikdash have come back already. The party wasn't for the Jews, and Achashverosh was wealthy enough; he didn't need, to take those kelim, etc. But why? What's wrong with using kelim for the Beit HaMikdash? It's called me'ilah. It shows a lack of respect for the temple. So, as a misdemeanor, if you eat from a kli of the Beit HaMikdash, that's a misdemeanor. That's a lack of respect. But a felony would be, on a larger level, if God gives the Jewish people the opportunity to return to their land and they don't come back, whoa, that could get God really angry. So when the rabbis pick on little misdemeanors for the reason for the punishment, and they're taking a little phrase that reminds us of the Beit HaMikdash, that might relate to a bigger theme, which we'll get to in a minute, of what happened during that time. There's one Megillat Esther happened. So let's continue now with our story. But remember, according to everybody, Koresh is before the Megillah. Koresh is the first Persian king. Achashverosh is the later Persian king. Which king? We'll get to that soon. Now comes, that was chapter 1, and here we are, Book of Ezra. Okay. What happens in chapter 2? They make Aliyah. Chapter 2, we get a list of all the names, boring as could be. Different reasons why we have so many names. That was on the list. They gave some example, but the main thing, what happens? Okay, the Kohanim and Levim from the people came back to the cities, like a nice ending. Now that we're back, it's time to build the temple. And guess what they do? The next year, right? It gets the 7th month after they return, and it's time for the high holidays. And they don't have time yet to build a temple, but they get the Mizbeach ready on the right spot because they're under foreign rule, and other people are living in the land. Okay, and they bring Olot, and they make Chag Sukkot, and they bring all the korbanot. But what happened? From the first day of the 7th month, they started bringing korbanot in time for Rosh Hashanah. Okay, Ve'echal Shem lo yusad. And Chazal learned from here, you don't need a Beit HaMikdash to bring korbanot, you just need a Mizbeach. So you have to wait to bring korbanot, you have to wait to build a temple. You can bring it now, and that's why a lot of temple faithful people try to sneak on Har Bayit and bring a korban. Not that I agree with that, but that's the halacha that's based on is based on this pasuk. The Gemara Zvachim talks about it. Okay, but they start raising money with the building fund to get the material ready to build the temple. Okay, the next year, okay, Zerubavel and Yeshua, those are the two leaders. Remember these leaders. Zerubavel, he's a political leader. Yeshua is the rabbi leader. Okay, he starts the Kohanim, and what did they do? They started getting the temple organized with Levim from age 20. Lenasechem Lechem Beit Hashem. Got it? And then we get a list of getting all the people who can be in charge, similar to what David did, getting people to say Tehillim, Ganu B'Halel Ba'odot L'Hashem, Kitov L'Hashem L'Chasdo. Very similar to, we'll talk about this in Divrei Yamim. Okay, now, what happened? It's been 50 years pretty much since the temple was destroyed. And therefore, the old-timers who are still around remember the good old days, and they say this whole thing is rather a bit of a joke compared to what it used to be. But again, that's a little side point that's made several times in the book. Okay? Remember that you can tell the difference between the people so happy of this new start and the people sad of how little it is compared to what it used to be. Now, chapter 4 is what's going to get us discussing about the years. The local population, here's what's happening, right? And they want to join in the building with it. They come to Zerubavel, our leader, our political leader, and they say, we want to join in this building project. And Zerubavel tells them, this is the Jewish project. You guys aren't allowed. Okay? They get into a fight. And therefore, the local population, not the Jews, but the local population, the Am Haaretz, weaken the hands of the people from Yehuda. They scare them for building. I call this the first Intifada. They have lobbyists. Those letters come up later on, writing the Persian authorities, don't trust these Jews. Give them a finger, they'll take a hand. Let them build a temple, they're going to ask for independence and they're going to cause trouble. Don't let them get started. And therefore, there's all these lobbyists giving all this hate mail about the Jews. And all that lobbying against the Jews and stopping the building, called the first building freeze, right, continues from the time of Koresh until year 2 of Daryavesh. Understand? Right? From the beginning of Koresh, from the second year of Koresh, till Daryavesh is the building freeze. Now, there's also trouble during the reign of Achashverosh. See this line here? Okay? They also wrote that. Now, there's a big argument, just some shot, right? We know from Koresh to Daryavesh, we know they're two different kings, two different names. So Koresh is one king, the first king. Daryavesh is the later king. Between Koresh and Daryavesh, there's a building freeze. The question is, how many years are in between? It doesn't say. Got it? Now, anyone know how the rabbis calculate how many years are in between? It's real simple. What do we know? We know that in year 2, we know from Haggai, in year 2 of Daryavesh, they broke ground on the temple. Now, I'm going to open up a different pasuk in a minute. Let me open up a different chumash here real fast. We'll open up, let's just go right to Zechariah, make life easier. Actually, where are we? I don't want here. I want, just chapter 2 of Haggai. This is famous. In the 7th month here, in year pasuk Yud, okay? There's great hopes. Remember, Haggai has to encourage the people to build. He did this when he did Trei Asar. On the 24th day of the second year of Daryavesh, right, which is Erev Hanukkah, Haggai gives a nevuah that what? Pay attention. It says, pay attention to this day, in verse 15, from the day that they start building, put stone on stone, Beichal Hashem. He goes on and on. He says, pay attention to this day, okay? From the 24th of Kislev, from the day that we start building, we set the foundations of Heichal Hashem, pay attention. So they first break ground on the temple in the second year of Koresh, first and second year of Koresh. There's the building freeze until the second year of Daryavesh. Got it? Now, it doesn't say how many years are in between. And then he also promised that hopefully there'll be big upheavals and sovereignty will return. That was the topic in Haggai. But his colleague, Zechariah, who starts in, where's Zechariah? Here we go. Zechariah starts his well also in the second year of Daryavesh, right before and right after. He has this dream and visions, etc. And in the 11th, like a month or two after they break ground in the temple, in the 11th month, 10th month here, the 10th month, I'm sorry, no, Chodesh Shvat, I guess that's the 11th month. In the second year or two of Daryavesh, he has this vision. And in that vision, we have a statement, not a prediction, but a statement, a prayer to God saying, how long are you not going to have Rachamim on Yerushalayim in Ur Yehuda? Ashir Zamta Zeh Shivim Shana. It's clear from Zechariah that year 2 of Daryavesh, it's been 70 years since the temple was destroyed. Got that? It's been 70 years of destruction. The temple's been destroyed for 70 years. In year 2 of Daryavesh. Got it? And therefore, I know there's 70 years from the destruction of the temple until year 2 of Daryavesh. Now, I'll stop the screen for a minute. We also know there's 70 years from the first year of Koresh back to the 4th year of Yehoiakim. Remember? Yirmiyahu's nevuah of 7 years of Bavel was in the first year of Nebuchadnezzar, was the 4th year of Yehoiakim. Now, how many years was Yehoiakim king for? Anyone remember? Yehoiakim was king for 11 years. Okay? Year 4 of Yehoiakim is the first year of Nebuchadnezzar. Yehoiakim dies, Yehoiakim takes over for a couple of months, then Tzidkiyahu becomes king for 11 years. So the 70 years of Yirmiyahu begin in the 4th year of Yehoiakim, 7 more years until Yehoiakim dies, and then 11 years of Tzidkiyahu. So basically, there's 18 years from the beginning of Babylonian rule until the temple is destroyed. Make sense? Nice and simple? Now, if there's 18 years, listen to this. If there's 18 years, there's an 18-year gap, got it, between Yirmiyahu's 7 years of Babylonian rule and Zechariah's 7 years of destruction. Now we just go back, keep that in mind. Now it's as simple as could be. If I want to know, going back to, where were we? Here, in Ezra 4, it says what? They stopped building from when to when? Here we go. From Koimei Koresh ad Yimei Daryavesh. Now, in year 2 of Daryavesh, they start building. And that's 70 years after the temple was destroyed. Got that? But Koresh begins 70 years from 4th year of Yehoiakim, 18 years earlier. So therefore, from the first year of Koresh to the second of Daryavesh has to be 18 years. Got that? That's what all the Parshanim come up with. Hope that made sense. Just keep that in mind. I'm showing you that everyone who makes calculations tells you there's 18 years between Koresh and Daryavesh, based on that calculation, based on those psukim. Now, if I go to the library and look at outside history, we did this last time, but take a quick look at it. Where are we? Share my screen. And we want this one. Share screen. Here we go. Not this one, but this one here. Where's my outside library? Here we go. Let's see if that fits. From Koresh to Darius. I mean, look, this is a list of in all the history books. From Koresh to Daryavesh are how many years? From 538 to 522. That's how many years? That's 16 years difference, something like that? No, 20. 16 or 17 years difference, okay? So if Darius, if year 2 of Daryavesh, right? If I go from the first year of Koresh to the second year of Daryavesh, I have about 17, 18 years. Got that? So the dates in Tanakh fit perfectly with outside history. And therefore, who's the king between Koresh and Daryavesh? Cambyses, who's not mentioned in Tanakh. He might be a certain. I'll get to Artach Shasta later on. There's a different that Artach Shasta have the letters, but that's for chapters 7 and 8, or 5 and 6. Now, when is Achashverosh of the Megillah? He's right after Daryavesh. That we talked about. Then in Pshat, Achashverosh of the Megillah is after Daryavesh, after the temple is built. Now let's go back to our pasuk. That was it. No, I'm sorry. Here in where are we? Here. Here's the gap. The first gap in the book of Ezra was from the first year, second year of Koresh until 2 year of Daryavesh. There's a gap. According to Chazal, it's Achashverosh. According to outside history, it's Cambyses. But there's 17 years during this building freeze. Now we're going to jump to chapter 6. We'll see Daryavesh builds the temple in chapter 6. Now let's go back to, where are we? How did we close this? I didn't share my screen, did I? My mistake. One second. Why don't you tell me I wasn't sharing my screen? Let me close this up again. I missed this screen share. Here we go. Sorry about that. I'll share my screen again. Here. This is the list of Persian kings. 538 or 539, right? To 522. So the second year of Daryavesh is 18 years after the first year of Koresh, which fits not perfectly. And with outside history, that puts Cambyses, the king in between, during the building freeze. Now, in Achashverosh, Xerxes would fit the king after Daryavesh, which would fit Megillat Esther, and fits historically perfectly with Megillat Esther. And that's how we talked about 2 shurim ago, that when you read Megillat Esther, you have to take into consideration that the temple was already built and the Jews didn't return. And that's the question to keep that in mind when you read Megillat Esther. Is there subtle criticism of the fact that Jews didn't return? And that might have been the reason why God wants to almost destroy them. Now, let's go back now to our study of Ezra and try to make sense out of all this. Now, after this building freeze, we mentioned Achashverosh. There was another building freeze. Or not building freeze, they wrote something bad about the Jews. Is that our Achashverosh? And is it before or after Daryavesh? Unclear from here. Okay. Then we talk about this other king, Artaxshasta, who's not the Artaxshasta of Sefer Nehemiah. That's spelled a little differently with the Samech here instead of a sin. But there's a hate letter. Most likely, I think this is Cambyses, from outside history. There's a hate letter that explains why they stopped building the temple. They're going back and forth where they open up, the people, local population sends a letter, don't let the Jews build the temple. And they listen to it, and that leads to the building freeze. And then finally, in chapters That continues in chapter 5, letters going back and forth. It's all in Aramaic, etc. And in chapter 6, they finally get the temple started. Okay? Thanks to Daryavish. So that's why if I take outside history, then that the so-called Artaxasta with the hate letters fits beautifully with Cambyses. Now we'll get to the problem we talked about last week and 2 weeks ago. Now we have explicitly, okay, the people return from exile, okay, with the help of Chaggai's Nevuot and Zechariah's Nevuot, they inspire them, and with the political help of Koresh, Daryavish, and Artaxasta, the kings of Paras, okay, and that got them, they finally built the temple when? On the 3rd day of Adar in year 6 of Daryavish. So remember this. Year 6 of Daryavish, the temple was built. What did we do? We have a Chanukhat Habayit in Adar sometime. And they bring lots of korbanot. And because that was in Adar, they do Pesach the next month, the 14th. And they had time to cleanse the Kohanim and make everyone tahor, etc. And they eat the Pesach and they make Chag HaMatzot for 7 days and everything's great. Remember, chapter 6 ends.
By the way, because at the end of the chapter, it's called Melech Ashur. That's Koresh. I mean, that's Daryavish.
No, Melech Ashur is that. All the parts talk about that. That has to be Melech Paras. But Ashur is the name of the area. Got it?
Is it?
Melech Ashur is referring to the king of Mesopotamia, which at the time is that's got to be Daryavish. Okay?
Is that what they call themselves, or that's just from Tanakh we see that?
That's Ashur is like the name of the area. What we call Mesopotamia, they'll call it Ashur. Again, there's no other way to explain it,
right?
Because the Assyrians, they're long gone. But the area that Ashur had, the Assyrian Empire, was taken over by the Babylonians, taken over by the Persians. So Ashur becomes the name of the area. So it's called Melech Ashur. But he's still, it's got to be referring to these kings we mentioned before, which was Koresh, Daryavish, and Artaxasta. They had to be Persian kings.
Right. And even though Artaxasta didn't help them, they still had to acknowledge.
No, that's Artaxasta, the letters. That's not the later Artaxasta.
Oh,
this is early Artaxasta.
Okay.
Now, again, the names in Tanakh of the kings don't match perfectly with the outside kings, but the main ones do. Now, let's stop here for a minute. From a prophetic point of view, what should happen right now? If there were any Jews, right, who were debating whether this is really Geulah or not. Remember, they weren't so sure. They needed encouragement. Most of them didn't come. We have a list of those who did come. But now the temple is built, it's time to return. Now, before we go next, I'm going to go back in 1 second. But this is the end of chapter 6. I'm expecting massive aliyah. Got it? What's there to wait for? Remember Yirmiyahu chapter 29? Call for me, I'll be there for you. It's happening. I'll support this in a minute from a later chapter in Zechariah. For some reason, in the book of Ezra, I go from year 6 of Daryavish, which is the end of chapter 6. Let's go right to the next chapter, to chapter 7. Chapter 7 begins after these events, and now it's Artaxasta spelled now with the Samach, notice. Right? We have a whole list about Ezra's thing. Ezra makes Aliyah from Bavel, etc. From when? And what year? In year 7 of Artaxasta. Right? And he comes to Yerushalayim, and then Ezra makes Aliyah year 7 of Artaxasta. Now, there's a gap. That's what I want to point out. That's just, and from now on, the king is from here, from chapter 7 of Ezra. By chance, you remember, it's year 7 of Artaxasta. The rest of Ezra and all of Nehemiah is during reign of Artaxasta. It's year 7, year 20. Nehemiah makes Aliyah, year 32, another story, and year 34. That's it for biblical history of the Persian time period that's explicit. Now, keep that in mind. Now, notice what we have again. We have a gap. Where are we here? We have I can't show my screen. Give me this. Okay. We have a gap. Here we are. Here's another gap that we missed before. Here we are. Oh, I'm sorry. Just look at the list of outside kings. Okay. Year 2 of Darius, they build the temple. Got it? And year 7 of Artaxasta, Ezra comes. Now, how many years, if I go by outside history, how many years passed from year 6 of Daryavesh to year 7 of Tachshasta, we're talking about 40 years. No, more than that. About 60 years. Got it? We're about 60 years in between, 60, 65, 70 years in between. That would be 2 generations later. Now, from what you've studied so far, I think you're out there already. When Ezra makes Aliyah, does he bump into Chagai and Zechariah? Not a word between them, right? Does he meet Zerubavel? Does he meet Yoshua and Gadol? No. Now, when they're in the time of Zerubavel, when the local population wants to join the building, they say, we have nothing to do with you. When Ezra makes Aliyah, everyone's intermarried. Remember? What Ezra finds when he makes Aliyah in your Sefer Tachshasta is classic 2nd, 3rd generation assimilation, isn't it? People are speaking other languages, they're intermarried, the city's in shambles, there's still a temple. Ezra doesn't deal with building the temple is there, but it's neglected. And nothing, basically nothing happened. Ezra brings Judaism back to that community and fixes it up, remember? He has to deal with Chilul Shabbat, intermarriage. He's dealing with the basics of basically a secular society. We see that in retrospect that the Aliyah from the time of Chagai and Zechariah and during the time of Daryavesh and building temple, it didn't take off. Got it? And therefore, in the gap between chapters 6 and 7 of the book of Ezra is exactly the story of Megillat Esther. Meaning, God does everything to get the temple rebuilt, and the people don't reciprocate. Got it? And that's my whole point. That was the background to understand Megillat Esther. And when you take that into account, that's the question: why all the imagery and all the parallels between the kings, what's happening in the Megillah and the Beit HaMikdash? Again, all alluded to in sort of a hidden way. Now, if I look at the outside history, the dates are perfect for when Ezra comes. It's what do you call it? It's 50, 60 years later, and it makes sense. But he doesn't find all the characters, all the leading people, Chagai, Zechariah, Zerubavel, Yoshua and Gadol, etc. They don't find them. Ezra finds their grandchildren and tons of intermarriage and a totally different society. So outside history, it's not work perfectly. But remember, there's this big gap in the book of Ezra between year 6 and 7, because basically, what happened from Tanakh's point of view, what happened? Nothing. And therefore, what's written? Nothing. Got that? My point? What I want to show you is the book of Ezra. Let me stop the share for a minute. No, I want to show you one other thing. Yeah, I'll stop the share for a minute. The book of Ezra only is not giving us continuous Jewish history. The book of Ezra is only focusing on all the efforts done to build the Mikdash. Keep that in mind, because we'll use that to explain Divrei Yamim. My point is Divrei Yamim I want to show you Ezra Nehemiah is a continuation of Divrei Yamim. We'll do this next week when we talk about Divrei Yamim. But in Divrei Yamim and the book of Ezra, the primary topic is temple building and Judaism building. Anything not related to that is just skipped, like it didn't happen, like nothing's there. Right? The book it's not a history book, even though it's called Chronicles. It's a history of all the efforts done to build the Beit HaMikdash. What does the book of Ezra record? Hatzarat Koresh, returning to build the Mikdash. Daryavesh finally getting a building, the buildings freeze, and starting to build again. The topic is temple, and that's it. After year 6 of Daryavesh, the temple is built. Nothing happened, nothing's recorded. The first person to put things back together again is Ezra, 50, 60 years later. That's the next event that's recorded. It's totally hiding what's happening in between. The only book that deals with the time period in between, which historically is Achashverosh, is going to be Megillat Esther in almost a satirical way. Now, to appreciate the gap, I want to go and show you in the book of Zechariah, the key to understanding the whole time period and something real key in Megillat Esther. If I go to the book of Zechariah, which we did already, but it's going to be exactly during this time period. Where are we? We're going to go to Zechariah chapter 7. Remember, year 2. This is my title today. How the prophets explain what's happening. I need the prophecies to understand what's happening in Ezra and Nehemiah. Year 2, they broke ground on the temple. Year 6, they finished the building. in the middle of this, in year 4 of Daryavesh. In other words, the infrastructure is up, but we're waiting. It's half built, the temple. Right? Zechariah gets a visit in the winter from a delegation from Babylonia. Right? Sefer Ezra, Regemelech, they're coming to pray to God. We'll see in a minute. It's a Babylonian delegation. And they're asking a question to the Kohanim in the Beit HaMikdash. Right? Do we continue fasting on Tisha B'Av in the 5th month like we've done for many years? What do we see from here? The community in the exile, ever since the temple was destroyed, we'll see in a minute, had a minhag of fasting on key events of destruction. We'll see Tisha B'Av, also Shiva Sabbatam is what we call, in what's called the 4 fast days. We'll see that they'll be there in a minute. Now, why were they fasting? To remember the temple was destroyed. What are they asking? We started this beautiful custom of fasting to remember all the terrible events that happened. Remember, like we have a discussion today in Israel. What are you going to do on the anniversary of we celebrate our independence? Right? Are we going to mark the Yom Kippur War? Are we going to mark the October 7th War? Are we going to call it? Are we going to mark it on October 7th or on Simchat Torah? You follow? It's a big argument today in Israel. But you're going to mark bad events as well. And therefore, they've been fasting every year in the 5th month. The question is, do we continue fasting? And Zerubavel gives them a great answer. God gives a great answer. He says, basically, tell them, you've been fasting. God's saying, have I been fasting? He said, and did I tell you to eat? Did I tell you to fast? But God's saying, basically, don't ask me the Rabbanans, ask me the Oraita. He says, you guys decided to fast, that's your problem. If you want to know what I want you to do, he's saying, God didn't command you to eat, God didn't command you to fast. You decided to fast. That's up to you. But if you want to know what God wants you to do, it's simple. What do you need to remember on the anniversary of destruction? Remember why it was destroyed, right? Because when Jerusalem was sitting pretty, right? Remember what the Nevi'im told you. That's Yeshayahu and Yirmiyahu and Yirmiyahu and all what we call the later prophets. They called it the earlier prophets. But remember the prophets of the first temple told you when Yerushalayim was built beautifully, nice and quiet, and they warned you about the impending destruction. Okay? And in case you forgot, the prophets told you back then, do mishpat emet, do chesed v'rachamim, take care of the orphan, the widow, the stranger, etc. Don't think evil about your fellow Jew, etc. Don't play the sinat chinam game. Okay? You didn't listen to me. You didn't listen to Yeshayahu and Yirmiyahu, etc. And you made your hearts, like a stone. You didn't listen to me. God got angry. And therefore, I called upon you to do tshuva, to prevent the destruction. You didn't listen. And therefore, when you called to me to stop the destruction, I didn't listen to you. And therefore, I scattered you among the nations as a punishment, as rehab. And now he continues. It's a long answer he gives. Then he says that just like I went out of my way, okay, to punish you, I'm out of my way. I'm zealous now to bring you back. Kol Hashem, I'm returning now to Zion. I'm rebuilding Yerushalayim. I'm going to bring my Shekhinah back to Yerushalayim on the condition that Jerusalem becomes a city of truth and Hartzvot Hashem Har HaKodesh. Okay? And you think it's impossible? It can happen. Remember, it happened that little kids will be playing on the streets with old people. The famous line everyone knows, old people will be sitting on the streets of Jerusalem and little kids playing. Okay? And you think it's impossible? It's possible. Okay? And then God says, I'm bringing my people back from the east and from the west. Okay? I'll bring them back and they'll dwell in Yerushalayim. They'll be my nation. I'll be my people. That's the Brit of Chumash, remember? That's Brit Milah. It's Brit Sinai. Okay? On the condition you do Emet and Staka, I'll be your God again. I want this to be true redemption, but you have to do your side. What Zechariah is saying is redemption is a two-way street. We'll prove this in a minute. I'm doing my best to bring you back. You have to do your side. He says, you people need chizuk, right? When you hear all these words, remember what's happening? Remember again, year 4. Okay? What do you call it? Since the temple was established 2 years ago, okay? You pay attention. He says, what? Up until now, your economy has been a disaster. This is all from Chagai. And now it's like the old days. Now your land's going to grow. I'm going to bring rain at the right time. I'm going to bring my people back to their land. And just like you were a curse among the nations for the last 70 years, now you're going to be a blessing. Don't worry. Basically, yes, you can. Now, and then God says as follows in verse 14, Kol Hashem, just like I plotted to punish you when your ancestors made me angry and I brought the destruction, I didn't listen to your prayers. Now I'm going out of my way. I'm plotting now, right? I'm returning now, and I'm plotting to bring you back. Leitibet Yerushalayim. Don't be afraid. That yes, this can work, but what do you need to do? Because God gave you the political opportunity. God gave you a good foreign king who's helping you, who's allowing you to build the temple. I stopped the building freeze. You're working, and this can be redemption, but you have to do your side, and this is key. Here's what you need to do. Dabru emet ishet re'eu, emet mishpat shalom shiftu b'sharechem. In case anyone ever wants to apply this to modern day times, when God gives you political opportunities, they don't hear me? Wait. Okay, I'm sorry. You guys hear me okay?
Yes.
We're good? Okay.
Yep.
Here's what you need to do, right? If you want, God can give you an historical opportunity. In order for it to work, listen to these things. We barely hear rabbis saying, they say, speak truth. Remember? No fake news and things like that. Be kind to one another. Okay? Do justice and righteousness and do mishpat and truth in your chest. And don't think evil about your fellow man. Okay? And don't plant that evil. And don't lie and take false oaths, etc. Those are the things that God hates. But if you build a just society, the whole reason God destroyed the temple was for that unjust society. Fix that up, and God will be with you. Okay? And then comes a big line. Not only that, he says, okay, you asked about the fast days, he finally gets to the answer. New Rabbi, what do we do? Kol Hashem, the 4 fast days, the fast day in the 4th month, we call Shivas B'Tammuz, the 5th month, Tisha B'Av, the 7th month, Shivas Tzum Gedalia, and the 10th month, we call Asar B'Tevet. All those holidays are going to be, all those fast days are going to become holidays, okay, on the condition you love Emet and Shalom. Shamahu. Got it? There's potential, but that's the whole point the Chaim is making, is that God's giving you an opportunity, you have to do your side. And if you do your side, God says, things can be so good, not only you're going to return, other nations are going to come. Right? It won't be Jews coming from Chutz La'aretz lechalot p'nei Hashem like in the beginning, asking questions. The Jews will be living in Israel, and non-Jews will come to visit Jerusalem and to turn to God, and they want to join in. Uva mim rabim, this is like Isaiah chapter 2. Many nations will come, and powerful nations, to search for God in Jerusalem and to turn to God in prayer. Okay? And it's going to be so crowded, listen carefully now. This is Zechariah's great vision. As they're building the temple 2 years before it's finished, but this is his answer to the exile. Kol Hashem Tzvot. At that time, once the temple is rebuilt and you make a name for yourself, your economy is strong and things are going great, it'll be so crowded in Yerushalayim that there'll be 10 people from other nations waiting in line for the audience of a Ish Yehudi. I want to follow you because we heard that God is with you. Like Avram and Avimelech. Remember, Avimelech says, God's with you. I want to make a treaty with you. So Jerusalem will be so successful and Am Yisrael will be doing so great. There'll be a lineup of people waiting for the audience of an Ish Yehudi in the Beit HaMikdash. And that's the end of chapter 8. Chapter 9 is a whole new topic in the Masaot. That ends the simple Hebrew Scharia. And that's his great hope. Now, if you're aware of that, what should be happening now in the next generation? The Jews should return, things could be great, and other nations will be coming to an Ish Yehudi. You can take a wild guess how many times you have the word Ish Yehudi in Tanakh. Want to take a wild guess? 2 times. Yeah. Here and early in Megillat Esther, because who's the Ish Yehudi? Where is he? Ish Yehudi, according to Zechariah, should be where? In Yerushalayim Abira. The word Bira is used only for Yerushalayim beforehand. It really means the name for the temple. Okay? And where's our Ish Yehudi? Instead of where? Instead of being in Yerushalayim, where is he?
Shushan Abira.
Shushan Abira. What do the Jews do? They replace Yerushalayim with Shushan. And when's this happening? During the reign of Achashverosh. Now, if you look at outside history, where's Achashverosh? After Dayavesh. Now, if you know Yischaria, right, you catch how satirical that opening line is, which we say so proudly. Ish Yehudi, who belongs in Yerushalayim, is in Shushan Abira instead of Yerushalayim Abira. And what's his name, for God's sake? Marduk? Who's the key Babylonian god, the one that Koresh mentions in the Cyrus cylinder? He said Mordechai is Marduk. That's not a Jewish name. Now, that doesn't mean he's not from Marduk, but his parents gave him a Goyish name. Don't be surprised. We have that to this day when you're living in a foreign country. So that line, again, Mordechai becomes a tzaddik, he's a hero, etc. He brings salvation. But that's a question when I'm reading Megillat Esther and know Zechariah, got it? And know the background in the real time period, right? Is there a subtle message in Megillat Esther alluding to the fact what should have happened? Okay, that's all I needed for now. Instead of what should have happened, right, what Ezra does 60 years later is what should have happened right away. Got it? Ezra comes from Bavel with all the people, with Kohanim and Levim, and they get Jerusalem, moving again. So it takes 56 years till it finally happens the right way, but way too late already. And therefore, Bayit Sheni never gets off the ground. I mean, things don't return until it has Hasmonean revolt, and that doesn't go so well either. A very short-lived redemption. But there was great potential in the beginning by Sheni, and it all falls apart. And that's the question when you read Megillat Esther, how much you take all that into account. And when you take all the parallels to the temple and things, and the hero's name being Mordechai, and Esther being the name change for like something being hidden, or maybe Ishtar, etc. That's the question. Is Megillat Esther written where if the reader knows Zechariah and knows the historical background, what's really happening, is there allusions to? Is it subtle? Is it satirical rebuke? Now, if you know Greek satire, which started around the same time period, it's around the 5th, 6th century BC, it fits really nicely because it's the style of the time. Why write something satirical? Again, then there's a story that happened. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying the story didn't happen, but the way it's told is like in a satirical way. But that's a class already in detail of Achashverosh. All I'm saying is when I study Megillat Esther, how much do you have to take into consideration all this history? Now, there's two ways not to notice it. Either don't study Tanakh, you won't notice this. Don't know Nevi'im Achronim, and don't study Zechariah and Yirmiyahu, etc. Or be drunk, and we're machmer on both. We don't study the time period, and we turn it into a getting drunk holiday. But that's enough musar for the night. Now, one last point. That's why we want to show you today that if I want to appreciate this gap in the book of Ezra, let me go back to my screen here of the missing years. If I follow outside history, the book of Ezra fits perfectly with outside history. Because Daryavesh is Darius, this Daryavesh, Achashverosh, and Ezra comes time of Artaxasta, and everything fits perfect. What do the rabbis do? The rabbis crunched all the years. Remember? And they take this whole 200 years of Persian history and they crunch it into some 30 years. 30, 40 years. I'll show you and why they do it. That's a whole different topic. I'll just do the quick version of it. We did it briefly last week with the Psukim and Daniel. I told you we'd get to it this week. I'll do a real brief version of it. But if I go back to our gaps, so in our book of Ezra, this is what we did today. There was a gap in the book from year 1 or 2 of Koresh to year 2 of Daryavesh, and we figured out based on relative years of Chagai and Zechariah, about 70 years, that it has to be 18 years in the gap. And then there's another gap from year 6 of Daryavesh to year 7 of Artaxasta. And that takes us to the end of Tanakh. Then there's another gap between the end of Tanakh and outside history. That's already a different story. But the main gaps in the book of Ezra are this gap from Koresh to Daryavesh, which we can calculate, and Daryavesh to Artaxasta, which is totally skipped. Maybe possibly on purpose. Again, Serubavel, there's no gap. What did the rabbis do? The rabbis did like this. They took Achashverosh, or the real Achashverosh, right? Let me go up here. They take our Achashverosh here and put him. I'm sorry, they take. Here we go. They take Achashverosh here. This guy, and they put him here in between. They put him here, and then they claim that this king and this king is the same. Darius and Artaxerxes, they say that they move him up, and then Darius and Artaxerxes is the same king. Now in Pshat that simply can't be. I'll try to explain why they do it. I'll do this real fast. But so that's the main part of my share. I hope it made sense. Well, my time's almost up. All I want to show you is that in the book of Ezra, from year 6 to 7 is a massive gap. If I look at outside history, and Pshat of Tanakh. There's 56 years in between, 2 generations later, and the great hopes that Zechariah talked about fizzle out. Nothing happens. Instead, Am Yisrael stays in Galut, and that's the time period in Megillat Achashverosh. Do you take that in consideration when you learn Achashverosh? When you learn Esther, that's a big machloket. I think we should, but that's a topic in different topic. But in the book of Ezra, this time period is skipped. When Ezra comes, it's a whole new ballgame. And this has to do with intermarriage and Judaism and getting back together again. The economy's getting filled up, the city is dilapidated, we have local population giving us trouble. Again, that's all the rest of the story of Nehemiah. This may be part of it next week. What do the rabbis do? I'll do this real quick. I talked about it briefly, but in a nutshell, in the Second Temple period, later Second Temple period, once the Greeks take over, everyone's using the Greek year. Agreed? We talked about this briefly before. Everyone's using the Greek year that began in minus 312 BCE. And the Greeks, unlike anyone before them, started incrementing a year working forward all the time. They stopped counting to kings. They started counting to the basically to Hellenistic culture. Was that after the battle, after Alexander the Great, there was a battle of succession. And the battle of Gaza in 312 BCE, they divide the empire between the Seleucids in Syria, Tamai in Egypt, Demetrius up in Greece, and they start counting year 1 in minus 312. That's called Minyan Shtarot, and that's the only year system that people are using from then on. And therefore, all through the Talmud, the Greek year is the year. Everyone uses that. So everyone's using what's called Minyan Shtarot because you need to know the year when you write a star. No one counts the kings anymore because no one else is counting the kings. Everyone's counting to the Greeks, and everyone's under Greek culture. The Romans continue it. Later, Islam continues it. But up until the 10th century, when the Christians started using their Lord, everyone's using the Greek year. And the Jews use the Greek year. The Gemara talks about it all the time because you have to have a year on the date. The rabbis, though, I think it's as simple as could be, they want to turn the Greek year into a Jewish year. Got that? Watch what they do. I'll do this nice and simple. I'll share my screen and we'll do this together. Files, open up a little whiteboard here. Okay. Loading your whiteboard. There's my whiteboard. Okay. Let the collaboration begin. No, whiteboards. Why can't I just sign in to save your work? Wait, what happened here? They changed something. A new one. Here we go. That's better. New whiteboard. Okay. Something. Oh, what are they doing to me here? Okay, good. Test. Can I text? Where's my text? Text. There we go. No, on a sticky note, I want to text. Okay, here we go. Text. There we go. I'll make it nice and bigger. 18, we want 20, 22. Okay. From Yetziat Mitzrayim, when Shlomo builds the Beit HaMikdash, it's 480 years from Yetziat Mitzrayim, isn't it? It's from, I'll write it like this. Oh, no. What happened here? No. We got to erase that. We have to erase. No pen. Erase. Somebody hit the screen. Okay, don't worry about that. I'll just go back now. Forget that. I'll write text again. No, I think I have it on a different source sheet. I'll do it. Let me just do it from I'll do it out loud. Forget it. It's going to be too complicated because we're running out of time. Oh, no. We don't want in the meeting. We want to close this thing up. Okay. I'll do it nice and simple. Okay. We'll do like this. What the rabbis wanted to do, I'll try to keep it as simple as possible in 2 minutes. The rabbis want the Greek year to be a Jewish year. And they want, when we count the Greek year, we want Greek year to be the Jewish year. And we want to count to Yetziat Mitzrayim because that's what Chumash does. Chumash counts to Yetziat Mitzrayim. Sefer begins in year 2. Sefer begins in year 40. And when they build the temple, it's year 480. So the last time I count Yetziat Mitzrayim is when they build the temple in 480. Yetziat Mitzrayim, when Shlomo builds the temple. When you calculate the years of the kings, it's 410 years from the time Shlomo builds the temple until the temple is destroyed at the end of Tzidkiyahu. And then there's 70 more years until Daryavesh. So real simple as could be, I have 480, 410, and 70, 960. Got that? That's from the time we leave Egypt until the second year of Daryavesh, when they break out of the temple, it's 960 years. Got that? Now, I want the Greek year to be a Jewish year. The temple is built in 960 to get Mitzrayim. The rabbis make this bold idea. What do they say? If Daryavesh is Artaxasta, got it? Meaning there is no gap between chapter 6 and 7. I'll head back to the shir. What do the rabbis come and say in the Midrash? It's Midrashic. It was never pshat. Say, there is no gap between chapter 6 and 7. It's the next year. Because why does Ezra make Aliyah? They just built the temple. And therefore, if Daryavesh is Artaxasta, it's all the same king, and there's no gap in the book. That's what the rabbis say. It's not pshat. For sure it's not pshat. It doesn't fit outside history. It doesn't fit Sefer Ezra. But they say it's the same king. And therefore, if Daryavesh is Artaxasta, how many years until Tanakh ends? 34 years. Understand? Because the last year in Tanakh is 34 for Artaxasta. If you see Daryavesh, there's 34 years from the time the temple is built until Tanakh is over. Therefore, Tanakh ends in year 994. Yitzhak Mitzrayim. Got that? I'm so close to year 1000. Along come the rabbis and say, 6 years later, Minyan Sharo began. Because the next year when Tanakh was over, Alexander the Great came and started his conquest, and he fought for 6 years. And when he finished his conquest, they start counting Minyan Sharo. There's no historical basis for that at all. Other than it's true Alexander the Great was a great king, and started counting afterwards, but that's not what happened historically. That's what why the rabbis do that? Because they want the Greek year to be a Jewish year. And therefore, whenever you write the Greek year, how do you turn the Greek year into a Jewish year? You add 1,000, and what do you get? Yitzhak Mitzrayim. You follow? That's all the rabbis did. But then it became, that beautiful custom became Jewish history. Understand? But that's what the rabbis did. They said, Daryavesh is Artaxasta. That's the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah. It's the same king. There is no gap in the book of Ezra. And therefore, now I have to put Achashverosh between Koresh and Daryavesh. I get no choice. And he's just not from the fit there. There's 14 years in the Megillah. That's right in between Koresh and Daryavesh. There's 18 years. They fits most of it is Achashverosh. And again, not historical at all, but it works beautifully in the Midrash. And therefore, Tanakh ends in 994. 6 years later starts Minyan Shtarot. And therefore, the Greek year is a Jewish year. Just add 1,000. Let's add 1K. That's what they did. Now, once it becomes a Jewish year, I'll try to do a whiteboard now. I hope it'll work. Where are we? Whiteboard files, whiteboard. Bring a new one. Okay, we don't need this. We want the new board. Okay, real simple. Okay, no one right. Close this up. Welcome to the whiteboard. Don't show again. Here we go. And get rid of this. Okay, nice and simple text. Okay. Tanakh ends in, what do you call it? The Greek year is what do you call it? The Greek year is 1,000. Yitzhak Mitzrayim is the Greek year, right? 1,000. And the Greek year is, no, right here. No one read anything. No one touch your computer now. I have to add, the Greek year began in 312 BCE. So I have to add 312. Okay. And then I add 2026. Okay, got it? So therefore, based on this, what's the Greek year today? Right? Today, the Greek year, the Minyan Shor would be, the Greek year today would be 2338. Got it? And Yitzhak Mitzrayim, it's 3338. Because according to Chazal, our year today is 3338 Yitzhak Mitzrayim. Got it? And therefore, Rav Meidan and all those, let's see very up to date Rav Meidan uses, which is really the Greek year and adding 1,000. Now, if Yitzhak Mitzrayim happened, if I follow the Sefer Breshit, Avram was born in 1948. Remember, so he's born. Yitzhak is born 100 years later, and then there's at least 400 years to Yitzhak Mitzrayim. Add that up for me, okay? It's 3338 since Yitzhak Mitzrayim. Then I want to add since creation. It's 1948 since Avram was born. Till Avram was born, 100 years till Yitzhak is born, and then 400 years. Guess what that totals up to? Take 3338, 1948, 100, and 400, and you get 57, where are we? 57, 60, what year is it? 86, is that right? Yeah, 86, yeah, 57, 86. I'll put a little thing here. Sign. That's our Jewish year. Most people don't realize that. But our Jewish year, why did I pick that out? Our Jewish year, 5786, is simply the Greek year plus 2448. Yitzhak Mitzrayim. Got it? From Breshit Yitzhak Mitzrayim. It's not historical, it's a total midrash, and it's based on what I want to end with, which is so surprising. The year, the Menachem, our custom of counting years, is assuming that there's no gap between chapters 6 and 7 in the book of Ezra. Got it? And there's only 6 years from the end of Tanakh until Alexander the Great starts his conquest, finishes his conquest. Which for sure is not, I'll give you a source that's got more of it, but that's what I want to show you with. That's what I wanted to share with you. I did that, I should do a longer version, but just for your, because you're doing the book of Ezra, that gap, the gap between chapter 6 and 7 is the key to everything. In Pshat, it's 2 generations, got it? In between, with outside history. In Drash, there's no gap. And that pushes Megillat Esther after Koresh, which means, and that's why Darius, who's the son of Esther now, allows the Jews to build the temple, you follow? All the famous Midrashim. That leads to the year 5786 and our Jewish, all of our Jewish customs. Okay. So that's our thing. So that's all. But again, most people don't realize that. But you're learning the book of Ezra, that there's a big gap between chapter 6 and 7, and I call a prophetic silence, which is really rebuke for what didn't happen. Anyone apply that nowadays? That's a class in Zionism. This is not a topic tonight. What happens when the Jewish people, when God does everything to bring us back and we don't come back? That's a topic in itself.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we'll stop here, and we're way too late already. And next week I want to finish up with little things in Nehemiah, and we'll get to start with Divrei Yamin.
Question.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, in terms of the generations, so is there how many generations in Divrei Yamin? Isn't there like great grandchildren of either Ezra or Nehemiah, if I remember correctly?
Yeah, sure. We go much later. No, if you follow the genealogies, alternate Tanakh, there's way the Serubavel doesn't work. It just doesn't
what doesn't work?
Seder Olam, but the midrashic work, but the crunch years of 30, it doesn't work. There's people mentioned later in the book in the genealogies later in Nehemiah, even also some genealogies in Ezra, but the ones in Divrei Yamin for sure. There's 3-4 generations until you get to Ezra, from the time they return.
Mm-hmm.
You look at the Kohanim from, there's the Kohanim and there's the people from Yehuda. We'll see, there's Yashiv. Again, we can do that, but there's a whole, Pshat is simple. Everyone just follows the drush. Nathan, you had a question?
Yes. So, what was it this week or last week that was titled Ketz Bavel Zerubavel?
The Ketz Bavel, yeah.
Was that the title for this week?
Yeah. Ketz Bavel Zerubavel. That was that was sort of the title. The Ketz Bavel. That's our thing. Zerubavel came back and rebuilt the temple in year 2 of Darius after the 70 years, and then nothing happened afterwards. The next stanza is a story of what he got in the song. What happens? What's the next stanza about? Right? We go from Zerubavel returning, and that's it. We skip to Hanukkah. 200 years later in outside history. Because that's when the guy's supposed to be fulfilled.
Can I share an anecdote?
Is what? Depends what you mean by heresy. If heresy is shot, then it's okay. No, in my opinion, it's the only way to understand Chazal. If I really want to understand Megillat Esther, I need to know what's missing there. If I really want to understand Chagai, to make it meaningful, if it's heretical to find meaning in prophecy and make it meaningful, then if that's what heresy means, that's great. I call it from Kfira.
It was, so once I was walking home with the rabbi around Hanukkah time, and he asked us, so what does it mean, Ketz Bavel, Zerubavel? And I thought would give him the answer that I thought he meant. Is, oh, it must be of the opinion that Zerubavel is a name for Nehemiah. And then he said, no, it's been disproven.
Yeah, it's impossible. No, that's impossible.
But I thought that was the answer.
The best proof is there's different names, right? Just like Daryav and Tashas are different names. And listen, we have their graves. Understand? We have all the Persian kings that are listed, right? We have their tombs, we have their graves, we have all their history. We have lists in that. We have lists like written in stone of all these things. To follow, to take Seder Olam history, right? As pshat, you're burying your head in the sand. There's no way you can. It's not going to work. I'm giving a really logical explanation for the Midrash, because to turn the Greek year to Jewish year is beautiful. It's a beautiful custom. It makes a lot of sense what they did. They had a different tfisa of history. Josephus, who's a Tana, and it's not Tana, he's living the same time Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, way before Rabbi Yosef bar Chalafta. He lists all these Persian kings. Got it? So they know, the rabbis know there's more Persian kings than that. It's a midrash to turn the Greek year into a Jewish year, which is a beautiful custom. But when the custom began, it wasn't historical. It was midrashic. It was a beautiful midrash to make the Greek year a Jewish year. It just became viral. That's all. Now, hundreds of years later, in Babylon, people forgot about how it came about, and it became Jewish history. But
let me tell you what reason we sing Ketz Bavel, Zerubavel.
The what?
He said then that the reason we sing Ketz Bavel, Zerubavel is to remember the words of Zechariah to Zerubavel.
Of course, that's it. That's for sure. That I agree with. Yeah, that's the message. That's the message we need today. It's not only about the Hasmonean revolt failed because it was all about koach and chayil, all about wealth and army force, and not about ruach. And that's why it all failed. That's an important message. That's not historical. That's like right. That's right on the ball, and that's why that's the haftarah for Hanukkah. Okay. Anyway, thanks everybody, and I'll go back to normal pshat next week in Nehemiah's story, what's going on, and give the introduction to Divrei Yamim, and why there's contradictions between that and Menachem.
Thank you.
Okay, sure. Bye bye.
Thank you. Have a good week.
Bye bye.